Good morning and welcome to Moments with Melinda. I am your host, Melinda Moulton, and today I have the great pleasure of interviewing Jon Gailmor. Hi, Jon.
Hey, Melinda. Good to see you.
It's so good to see you, my friend. Thank you for agreeing to be on my show.
Well, I'm honored that you asked, and it's wonderful being down here in New Orleans and having a contact like you, and makes me feel at home.
Well, you'll always be a Vermonter in our hearts.
Right.
So to my viewers who most of you know Jon Gailmor, but let me just tell you who he is. Jon is a singer, a songwriter, a performer, an educator, and an optimist. And this is going to be a good interview to be talking to an optimist because I could use some optimism today.
We all could.
Yes, we all could. So let's start from the beginning, Jon. You were born in New York State, but you grew up in the Philadelphia area. I'm from Allentown. Where in the Philadelphia area did you grow up?
The suburbs of Philly, Montgomery County. Um, uh, let's see. I grew up on a road called Surrey Lane, which is off of near Haverford and City Line, and near I don't know, near Germantown and near City Line Center, movie theater and shopping center. And I remember so many of those things growing up.
We both were raised up in Pennsylvania.
How come we don't talk funny?
Well, we do. I say water, and everybody goes
Oh,
water.
Wooder, and I like to eat a hoagie every now and then.
Definitely a hoagie. If I didn't have a gluten allergy, I'd eat a hoagie every day.
You too. My
So
son does.
does he too? Well, we'll have to
Same
talk
thing.
about that. So you have said that you were raised by a family that valued the heart and believed in changing the world for the better. Talk to us about your early childhood, Jon.
Well, one of my earliest memories is sitting with my father, um, who I'll tell you his story in a second, but we sat and watched the election returns, Eisenhower versus Kefauver, or Stevenson. Anyway, Adlai Stevenson and Dwight Eisenhower. I remember it was, I guess, 1956, and we watched the returns. I remember sitting with him and we were glued to the television. He always cared about politics and world events and current events. And he was, his story, I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version. He was brought up in a family of Orthodox rabbis. And so he had no choice, became an Orthodox rabbi, as most of the boys became rabbis, many of them, or a lawyer or a rabbi. Those were the two options. And so, but he became an Orthodox rabbi, had his own temple in Brooklyn at age 18, and was a real scholar of Hebrew and Jewish history. And then he was set up to marry, I emphasize set up to marry the heiress to the Horowitz Margaretan matzah empire. And if you know what matzah is, I don't know how many people do, but it's kind of like packing material. But if you put butter on it, it tastes pretty good. And so he was set up to marry, and they had two kids, and there was no love in the marriage because it was a setup thing. And so he did what people do when they're angry and they're questioning their upbringing, and he questioned his roots and his upbringing. Never his Jewishness. He always appreciated the history of the Jews, which is a pretty noble history, and but he became an atheist, and he got angry because he had no say in his life. So he had a nervous breakdown, and eventually was committed to a mental hospital. His wife committed him to a hospital in upstate New York, and then they got divorced, and he met my mother there, who was seeing a shrink at this mental hospital, practiced there. So she was an outpatient, he was an inpatient, and they connected and started helping each other out with their issues. And no one on the face of the earth is surprised that Jon Gailmor's parents fell in love in a mental hospital.
Oh my God, what a story.
Yeah, so then they both got out and they got married and had my sister. And 7 years later, they had me. And my mother lost a child in between us. And they got me out of there 6 weeks early because I wanted to get out here. I needed to sing to people. And
Yes, you
so
did. Yes, you did. Now your computer's shaking a little bit. Is it set on a
it's
solid?
on my lap.
Oh,
I'll try to just hold still. There.
all right. Well, that's hard to do, but if you want to move it to a table, we'd be fine with that too. So,
Okay.
John, who had the greatest influence on your choice of music as your career?
Boy, a lot of people. My career started in 19, well, it was in 1971. I needed to go away and find myself. I had graduated from college and had no clue. I had gone to, I went to Temple University grad school in Philly. I went to Penn undergrad, Temple grad school in elementary ed because people around me thought I should be an elementary school teacher. And I said, okay, I'll try that. So I took courses in elementary ed and realized two things. I can't go to the same place every day and do the same thing. I'm not wired that way. The other thing I learned is that you can't learn how to teach from taking courses. And my sister, bless her heart, kicked me in the rear and said, go away, find yourself. So in 1971, hitchhiked for 7 months around the continent of Europe and 14 countries. And I met a college friend at Kennedy Airport who was a musician. And we arranged to meet in Paris and buy a couple of cheap guitars. And we hitchhiked through the French Alps, getting a repertoire together that tourists would enjoy. And we started singing in cafes along in Cannes and Nice and Ventimiglia, Italy, and then Athens, Greece. And I had a real revelation because I was singing to people and entertaining people and getting paid for this. And I said, are you kidding? I have never been happier than singing to people and entertaining. And you can get paid for being this happy? Are you kidding? It almost seemed un-American to me, Melinda.
Oh,
And,
how wonderful. What a great story. John, put this computer on a table
all
so
right, I will. I
thank you
will.
so much. Let's just do that so you don't have to
Right
worry
now.
about it. And that way you
Oh,
can move, and that way you can move all you want because I think you're a
okay.
mover and a shaker and you've got motion and melody and harmony inside you. And that way you don't have to worry about it. And I can see and I can
All
watch you
right.
shake your beautiful
Now
energy.
you got a shadow, but that's
No, no,
okay.
that's fine. You look terrific. That's much
Thank
better.
you.
So that's a great story. And so share with us what brought you to Vermont.
Well, Vermont did. After I got back from Europe, I started a solo career, which I was not ready for. And in fact, the first solo gig I ever had was in Westport, Connecticut, where we lived. And it was at a restaurant. And during the first song, the owner did this, which means stop, because someone called in a bomb scare. And that was my first night of singing as a soloist. And I'm glad I don't believe in omens, but anyway, I was just not ready for it. So I met over the next couple of years a high school friend of mine named Rob Carlson, who was a brilliant songwriter and great musician, and we always connected at parties, high school parties and stuff. Musically, we just always looked at each other and sang in harmony, and we formed a duo. So for 2 years, we were Carlson and Gailmore and toured the country and sang in colleges and clubs around the country. And back then, most colleges had a little coffee house downstairs in a basement or a folk club, and we sang at a lot of those. And then eventually got a contract with the New York City music business, made an album for Polydor Records in 1972 or 73, and so this album came out and called Peaceable Kingdom, Carlson and Gailmore. And it sounded great, but I hated the people we were dealing with in the big time music business because they didn't care about the music. They just wanted to make money. And in fact, they said to us, "We have this other duo coming up after you." And it was Hall and Oates.
Wow.
And so that's what they wanted us to be like. And I didn't want any part of it. And I hated their guts, and they were sleazebags. And they couldn't care about the music. They didn't care about the actual music. So my partner felt a little differently, and we split up. And I went started a solo career. And so when I figured out where I needed to move to, I remembered something about Vermont because we had sung in a few places in Vermont, and there was just something different about the people and the atmosphere and the climate and the welcomingness and the whole everything was different. So I said, this is where I need to be. So my girlfriend at the time and I moved to Vermont, and we started out and moved to East Montpelier. And the reason was we wanted to move to Burlington because of UVM and the big music scene, college. But we got tired at Montpelier, so we pulled over and and moved into a place called Lackey's Tourist Home, which was right downtown. Stayed there for 2 weeks and fell in love with Central Vermont. And so we moved to East Montpelier, and that was my first home in Vermont, East Montpelier, 1973. No,
So,
77, I'm sorry, 77.
so John, were you part of the 60s revolution, the 60s and 70s revolution?
Well,
Were
I
you
don't know if I,
you were singing revolutionary songs, or were you part of any of that?
I was never a big protester. I sang some. I was influenced by Pete Seeger. You asked me earlier. I would have to say my two biggest musical influences were Pete Seeger and Motown.
Wow.
You know, there's a
Because you're from
dichotomy.
Philly, because the
I'm
Phillies.
from Philly.
Do you remember Jerry Blavat?
Of course.
'Cause I used to sneak,
WIBG.
yeah, I used to sneak out of my home in Allentown, like 15, 14, and my girlfriend would steal her parents' car and we'd drive down for Jerry Blavat.
Well, Jerry Blavat and WIBG was the big AM station, High Lit, and all those people. And I listened to them. And my father, his history, getting back to his history as a protester and as a courageous human being, he when he somehow became a journalist and broadcaster in New York City and had a left-wing program, and they didn't call it talk shows back then, but he interviewed people on this show who were kind of naughty, like Paul Robeson, famous, beautiful, beautiful black singer, gorgeous voice, and an actor named what was his name? Hal. I don't remember, but he interviewed a lot of people who
Probably
had
Lenny Bruce.
Lenny Bruce got into trouble. My father got into trouble for being
Yeah.
outspoken.
Yeah.
He became Henry Wallace's main fundraising speaker in 1948. Wallace, who ran against Truman and Dewey. My father would speak, toured the country with him, along with Pete Seeger and other people. And he would be in Madison Square Garden, for instance, and got up to speak, my father would, and people would reach for their wallets just when my father got up. It was Pavlovian. It was called the Gailmor reflex. And he was a mesmerizing speaker, my father was. And then got blacklisted, lost his job. And I was born into that campaign, 1948.
Dear
But
Lord.
my father taught me by osmosis that it's courageous to offend the right people and speak out and not be afraid. And so my songs reflect that.
Yes, they do. They do.
I
Yeah.
just express myself. I put myself out there, thrust myself out there, and hope that it resonates.
And
And
everybody loves you. I mean, you are a Vermont treasure. You are one of those big icons in Vermont. So now, but you also performed all over the world. Um,
correct.
so And you have released 7 recordings, 7 albums. Now, my viewers can hear your music on Apple Music, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, and YouTube.
Yep.
Um, so talk to us a little bit about what was your most memorable concert
Oh,
place
that's
you've ever
really
played?
hard. I will say they're all memorable. I mean, I try to make them all memorable, and but one of the most pivotal ones was way back in 1970, 78, and in Randolph, Vermont, at Chandler Music Hall, and I sang, and there was a guy there in the audience um, who owned Green Mountain Records out of Northfield. And he wrote me a letter afterwards and said he wanted to record me. And that was the first time I'd ever been recorded in my solo life. So my first album as a soloist was called Passing Through on Green Mountain Records. And that was the first one. And that led to another, and not on Green Mountain, but other ones. And but that concert that was pivotal, not the most memorable necessarily, but I mean, I've had countless memorable concerts, and I gotta say, one of them was in Sugarbush in 1979. I was opening for Pete Seeger and Arlo Guthrie. It was the opening act, and so Pete Seeger was sitting on a bench backstage, and I walked over to him. I'd never met him. And remember, I said earlier that he had toured with my father for Henry Wallace. I went over to him. I said, Pete, I've been wanting to meet you my whole life. My name is Jon Gailmor. And he said, Oh, Bill, just like that. Immediately remembered my father. And I'll never forget that moment.
Oh, that's such a
So,
beautiful story.
but
Now,
I also I am drawn to Motown music, to rhythm and blues, and Temptations and the Four Tops and the Miracles, Smokey Robinson. Um,
the Phil Spector sound.
Something that just moves me about that music that no other music does. And so I swear I must be at least half black
Well,
because I just love it, and went to college in Philly and went to a lot of concerts of Motown.
I can do the James Brown dance.
Uh-huh.
I can anytime there's I think it's the Philly vibe. If you're raised as a child in that part of the world, it just
Must be.
seeps and I bet you're a great dancer. I mean, I have
Oh,
to.
well, no, let's stop it right
Oh,
there
okay.
because,
Well, I am a great dancer, so someday I'm going
okay,
to dance with you. Now, I
I've
want to go
seen you
on.
dance.
I want to move on with you write songs that make people feel alive. You state on your website, which by the way, to my viewers is jongailmor.com. And I'm going to spell it for you right now. You got to go check out the website. JONGAILMOR.com. And you write on your website, music for humans, prenatal through prehistoric, spanning, this is outrageous, spanning the entire emotional spectrum. You focus on original, relevant, irreverent, children's American, international, and totally absurd tunes with humor, zest, audience involvement. That's all part of your performances. Talk to us a little bit about what our viewers would expect if you were performing for them.
Well, first I'll define prenatal through prehistoric. And what that means is, I do songwriting artist in residencies at schools where each class writes an original song, both lyrics and music, and then we have a culminating performance. But I work for preschool kids. I work with them to help them write songs. And you can well imagine how amazing their songs are because they're unbridled and they are spontaneous, and they never overthink. They just blurt, which I do too. And they just speak their minds and sing their minds. And so, and on the other end of the chronological spectrum, I work in senior centers and elder care centers and help the elderly, like me, write songs about their past. And it's incredibly powerful that they write songs about their childhood. and everything in between. I've worked, in elementary schools and junior highs and high schools and colleges, um, and everywhere. And you know, I remember working at St. Michael's, and I was hired by the history department to come in and help them write a song about the history of revolution in Europe. And that was their final exam, that they would write a song. So I sat and did the same thing I do, same process, and they wrote an outrageous rock and roll song about the history of revolution in Europe. So, but I love the diversity of my professional life and my personal life. I mean, um, I can't stand being with one kind of person or one color or one religion or anything. Um,
So,
so
so
I love New Orleans for that reason, and
I was going to say,
just
yeah,
full of people.
and I remember, John, I remember you coming to Brewster Pierce years ago when my kids were
Yeah.
there. And my daughter, she took up the piano and singing, actually voice, very shortly after you coming to the school. So you had a great impact on my daughter. So I thank you for that.
Wonderful.
Um, so how do people get involved who want to become so? How do they get involved in one of your workshops? How do my viewers do that? Do you ever do
Well,
online where people can do it
I
online with you?
I tried that once. I tried actually doing a songwriting workshop online, and it really didn't work. It's a totally in-person phenomenon. I have to be with the people or see them. I mean, this online experiences was kind of funny because I'd see the kids' faces around the monitor screen, each a little square, and I was pointing to a kid and I'd say, "How about you? What's a good adjective we could use?" And I pointed to one of them, but I wasn't really pointing to them. I was pointing at the square on my monitor screen. So I had to get one of the faculty members to be my liaison between me and the kids and say, call on the kid with the green suspenders and the flannel shirt. So no, I've got to be there with them, and people can go to my website or go to my Facebook page or, contact me any way they can. I mean, I have an email address, I have a and and get me in their school. Just say we want to do a residency with you, and I will come no
Yeah,
matter where it is.
no kidding. So you'd come back to Vermont, you'd come to
Of
anywhere in the world.
course.
All
I
right. So
mean,
getting to my viewers, it's Jon Gailmor, JonGailmor.com. Go visit that. Well, that's good to know because I think you're gonna get some phone calls.
and here's my web. I'll give you
Yes,
my email
oh,
address too,
perfect.
which
Go
is
ahead.
really good. I mean, it's good to have because I'm not a big, huge texter. I often either forget to take my phone with me, which drives my kids nuts, or I forget to check my texts, my emails. No, I check my emails. The email address is Gail Murph. My wife's last name was Murphy, so I combined our two emails. Gail Murph, our two last names. Gail Murph, no Y, 85, which was the year that we got married, at gmail.com. So Gail Murph, 85 at gmail.com.
Thank you so much for that. So I want to talk to you something that's personal to you. You went public this year about your leukemia and plans to move to New Orleans and the loss of your beautiful wife, Kathy. Would you share with my viewers? How are you doing, John?
How am I doing? Well, we've got to have more than an hour, Melinda. No,
Well,
I'm just kidding. I am doing exceptionally well, and a lot of it is this great hospital where I've been getting tests and seeing people and getting chemotherapy when I can, when the blood levels allow it. Um, and I even wrote a song, a tribute song to this hospital. That was one of the first songs I had written in 2 years. And here's how it happened, Melinda. I was sitting there waiting for someone to come in and take my blood. And this very attractive young nurse came up to me and said, "Okay, John, I'm going to grab your vitals." Now, most normal people would know that she was talking about blood tests, pulse, etc. Not me, being who I am. Yeah, my mind plummeted to the gutter, and so I wrote a song about. It turned out to be a tribute song to the auctioneer, as they say, Auctioneer Hospital in New Orleans, and it's called "Scan That Band." You know that white band they put around your wrist. Scan that band, grab them vitals, and it's right on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and search on Jon Gailmor scan, you'll see it.
All right. Well, my viewers should do that. Well, good. Well, I'm glad you're doing okay. And again, I'm so sorry about the loss of your beautiful wife,
Well,
Kat.
thank you.
No, the
Yeah,
world
it
misses
was
her.
devastating, and yeah, I know I still am not over it.
No,
Um,
never be
but
over it.
when I sing, it helps, and having family around is a blessing, and that's why the real reason I moved to New Orleans was to get closer to my son and his wife and my beautiful grandchildren.
Well, I'm so happy. And you look well. You look well, John.
Thank
So,
you.
so do you still have your children's music show? Do you still do the music show?
No, that was it went for 25 years, and it ran its course, and I just ended it. It's called Just Kidding. It was, and it was started on WNCS in Montpelier, and then went to WDEV.
Right. I remember it.
Um, and I'd had enough. It was good to
Well,
stop, and it was wonderful.
John, you're moving on. So you were a Hunts regular when it was on
Correct.
Main Street. You played with a lot of folks. Do you remember when Taj came to Hunts?
Yes, I think I opened for him
I
actually,
think
and
you.
but one of the best ones, Melinda, was Richie Havens,
Yes, I
whom
remember.
I've always
Uh,
loved, idolized his music and his personality. And then I got a chance to open Chico, who ran Hunts and
right,
really made it what it was.
right.
Called me up and said, "Would you like to open for Richie Havens?" And my answer was, "Oh God, would the Pope like a wafer?" I mean, so I said, "Yeah." And so Richie and I, we sat there in the room backstage, and we were talking about our lives, and he was talking about his roots in Greenwich Village, New York, and he alluded to this singer um, who wrote the song. Everybody's talking at me, you know, that guy. And he said, "Do you know any other songs?" And by him, and I said no. And he took out. He said that he knows this other song by him, and wrote down the words on a yellow legal pad. Wrote the words to the song and the chords, and gave it to me. And said, "Here, take this." And so Richie Havens was the kind of guy that we all knew he must have been from his songs and his Woodstock stardom. I mean, he was really, to me, one of the real stars of Woodstock.
He was
And
revolutionary. He was a civil rights movement for me, man.
yeah, everything.
He was
He
in that, and you also played with Big Joe Burrell, the End Zones, and the Unknown Blues Band. So I wanted to get that in here. Um, John, what would your message be to our young people today about the world that they are growing up in?
well, I would tell them to be true to themselves and be honest with themselves and make music whenever possible, but if it's not possible, just be true and don't be afraid ever to speak out and express yourselves. And maybe most importantly, find your purpose and find your passion because everyone has a reason for being here. My reason for being is music, which is the first line of my Vermont song, but it's true, and everyone has a purpose. And I tell that to elementary school kids. I mean, as soon as they can talk, I tell them, find out, you got a reason for being here and a purpose. Find it and pounce on it. And parents, I think that's the most important job of a parent is to observe your child and see what turns them on, see what motivates them and makes them emotional, and then go with it and encourage it and pounce. And because if the world were full of people who were doing what they loved, it would be a good place.
Oh, John, that's so beautiful. Well, we're going to end. I have to end on that note because
Okay.
It's just such a beautiful one. I'm going to say goodbye to my viewer. I want you to stay on afterwards because I want to talk to you a little bit more. But what a treat to spend time with you and to get to know you better. Let me go over to my view here so I can see you. So we can be, I want to, kind of be together with you if I can make this happen.
Melinda, I think we might be brother and sister because I think we have a lot in common aside from geography and Philly and hoagies and cheesesteaks.
Oh,
Um,
and what about shoe fly pie?
of course.
On
And
pork roll and
yeah,
scrapple, right?
and Pagano's pizza.
Yeah, and Rittenhouse Square and the
That's
Barclay
right.
Hotel and Nan Duskin's. I mean, all of it. I mean, yes, we're so it's just I just want to say that Vermont misses you already. There'll never be another Jon Gailmor. You said that you hope somebody steps into your shoes, but you were a treasure, a master of love and compassion, of joy and hope. And what you left here in Vermont are your footsteps that we can all hopefully learn to walk in. So
Well, I have a comment on that is no one should try to fill anyone's footsteps. That everyone has their own footsteps. And I hear that a lot at the year. Um, Footsteps to fill. Well, you know what? I have mine, and mine are with me here. And my heart will always be in Vermont, even if my body and my music is here. Hopefully, I have left enough music in Vermont to be eternally there, along with my heart. And the other thing is, Melinda, you talked about treasure. Well, Vermont is a crown full of jewels. I mean, everyone who lives in Vermont is a jewel in that crown, and people need to find out what makes them shine and glitter and go with it.
you're a beautiful soul. I love you. And to my viewers, thank you so much for being with me today with Jon Gailmor. It's just been such a delight, John. And I look
Well,
forward to seeing you again if I get down to New Orleans. If you get back up here, I look forward
anytime.
to you. Thank you, my friend.
We have a spare room with your name on it
I
if you
would
need.
love it. And thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. And to my viewers, have a beautiful holiday. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And I will see you again shortly. Goodbye.